Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the in-game air traffic control options that you have in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now first things first, we're sitting here in a lovely Diamond DV20. This is a two-seater version of the Diamond 40. It's a pretty solid plane. It's not exactly the fastest plane, but it actually works for us fairly well for what we're trying to do today. So I'm going to go ahead and pop inside. Now first things first, this is the not the most sophisticated controls as you can see, and it's got a lot of metal kind of showing and springs and all that other good stuff, but it's going to work fairly well for us today. So let's go ahead and get this thing started, and we'll start taking a look at some of the different options that we have as far as our air traffic control goes. Get this thing cranking. Very lovely. Got all our fuel pressure and everything coming up. And we'll flip on the avionics master, and everything is looking pretty good so far. Go ahead and flip this to altitude mode. And let's go ahead and bring up the different controls we're going to need. So the first things first, whenever you're doing anything with air traffic control, you need to make sure you're using a radio that talks to air traffic control. Now for us, that's going to be our communications radios. Different aircraft in Flight Simulator have different avionics as far as controlling these goes. For us here in the DV20, our handy dandy controls are going to be right here. So the first thing you're going to want to do when you get to an airport is you're going to want to check to see what the aetis is. Now what the aetis is basically automatic terminal information service. And what that will do is it'll provide us with information as far as the weather and appropriate runways and all sorts of good things like that go. So normally if you want to access the page that gives you their traffic control options, you want to go ahead and tap the tilde key on your keyboard. This is going to automatically select a bunch of different frequencies depending on what you have at the given airport. One of my favorite things to do, for example, is to go into ground services, and depending on what kind of airport you're at, you can actually dictate what these different options are going to be. So I'm going to go back to ground real quick. You can see we can get fuel supply, we can get pushback, we can go back to clearance and come all the way back around. But the one thing you're going to notice is it's going to auto-tune to the aetis at the airport that you're currently at. Now, one of the things that makes this so powerful is if I wanted to, I could actually come down here and tune in the aetis code directly. Now, this is where things get kind of cool. If you've ever been over to the AirNav website, which is kind of a slick little website that has a lot of useful information as far as picking different places out goes, I'm going to pop that up so you all can see. If you scroll about halfway down, all the frequencies you see at this actual website are still valid in the Flight Simulator as long as the Flight Simulator is up-to-date nav information. So like you'll see right here, you have the aetis code, which is 126.65. Let's go ahead and dial that in without using the automatic mode and watch what happens. So we'll go 126.65. Now, if you have an issue where the radio is like, I can't tune it, it takes forever, you can actually go over a couple pages and change your channel spacing so that they're a little bit tighter. In this case, I'm going to do 25 kilohertz, because again, I don't need that much detail for what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and now continue my little tuning, and you can see my tuning is much more granular, if you want to think about it another way. I should say less granular. So let's go up to 6.5. Yeah, it's going to do it perfect. Press the swap button. Now watch this.
Republic Airport.
You hear it?
Kilo 180002. Wind 284 at 8. Visibility none.
Yeah, that's the weather. So if you actually pop up your tilde key again, you'll notice that you've got a couple bits of details. Tells us our cloud altitude, tells us our temperature and dew point. In this case, is why our clouds are so low. Tells us our altimeter. Once we know our altimeter, we can come over to our Holtzman window here over on the handy dandy device and set that. Or for those of you who are looking for the easy way, you can just press the B key on your keyboard as well. It's also going to tell us we're using runway tree 2 today. It's also going to be telling us that when we call, we're supposed to say where we're going. And of course, it's asked us to read back any hold short instructions. Now, one of the really cool things here, and I'm actually going to flip this on back over to Opera real fast, is that a lot of these websites actually will have a phone number that you can call. This is an actual phone number, and you can call this to listen to the real live air traffic control, I should say. In this case, ASOS. This is going to be another form of weather. You also have ASOS available at different nearby airports in case you want to confirm the weather as you're approaching down to a runway. So already, that's a wonderful tool you have at your disposal. All right, so now that we've got the weather, normally what we do is after we've started our engine, again, it's going to be different if you're a big fat airliner. We go ahead and call up air traffic control and request permission to go ahead and take off. And keep in mind, we're doing everything VFR. Now, if we were flying an IFR flight plan today, we could call up IFR and get an IFR clearance. But today, we're going to stick to a VFR flight, so we don't need this. Of course, if the weather were bad, you would need this. So I'm going to go flip over to ground. And I'm going to tell them where I'm going and where I'm departing. In this case, I'm departing to the north. I'll make the call. Republic ground, red 64 heavy, request taxi for north departure with Kilo. This Kilo, by the way, came from the aetis. It tells us what we need to tell the air traffic controller. So they're telling us to taxi to and hold short of tree 2 via Bravo 4, which is a spur, Bravo 3, which is another spur, cross 1, Golf 3, and then Alpha. And then we need to go ahead and contact tower on 125.2 when we're actually ready to take off. As soon as we read this back to him, we're actually acknowledging this, saying, okay, got it. So now all we need to do is figure out how to get to our destination. Fortunately for us, FRG is not the world's most complicated airport if you haven't actually seen it before. Now, if I actually go back over to our little fandy-dandy opera, you can actually see an airport diagram from the actual place that we're at. So you can see we're basically parked over here. They've asked us to go. Let's go ahead and take a look at the controls. They want us to go via Bravo 4 Bravo. So you can see there's Bravo 3 right there. There's Bravo 4 right there. So they want us to go via this one, which means we're right here, down to Bravo 4, cross the runway, get ourselves onto runway 1. Then we're going to go via Golf 3, which is a little strange if you actually look. Nope. So basically you're going to zigzag this way, cross here. We're going to cross Golf 3. Then they're going to tell us to go along Alpha, which is this runway right here. And then we're going to go ahead and park ourselves right there. So it's actually not too complicated of an operation, which brings us to the next thing we can do. Now, while you're on the ground, after you request permission, you can actually call up ground services and request pushback, even if you're a little teeny tiny airplane like us today. I'm going to go ahead and disengage my brake. So what he's going to do now is you can see him steering to get into position. By the way, under ground services, you have some really fun things, such as accessing the taxiway. You can go get yourself a fuel truck. All these are at your disposal. So you got to wait until he connects to your front wheel. You can watch this from the side. He actually does a pretty darn good job of it usually. Of course, if you're going to bring that little pushback cart that close to my propeller while it's running, things won't go well for you. So I actually recommend you call for pushback prior to chopping this guy up into teeny tiny little pieces. But hey, he's the guy who wants to join me on my flight today, so I'm going to go ahead and let him. All right, he's going to go ahead and connect to my front wheel. And we're going to request him to steer to the right. That means our nose goes to the left, not the other way around. Common misconception. All right, there he goes. Give me a little push there. Thank you, sir. You're being very helpful, sir. Very helpful. All right, you just got to get me out of the way. Generally, I recommend starting engine after he pushes you. Just make sure you call him back and tell him to stop early. Otherwise, he's going to send you flying. At any time, by the way, you can just hold down your brake and basically beat him to the punch. Okay, so now he's going to go ahead and get himself out of the way. Remember, I've already gotten permission to taxi at this point, so I'm done with him. Again, I'm not going to request clearance because I don't need to do this as an IFR flight plan. Things are a little different if you want to do them in IFR. All right, let's go ahead and get going. All right, go ahead and cut that away for now. And we'll just kind of roll along. Again, normally the only time air traffic control will call you after you've started rolling your aircraft around is if there's something that is concerning them, in which case they'll notify you pretty much right away. Whoop, sorry about that. This is a very complex area. We're actually at the end of the runway. They said that we were actually a little bit closer. There is a mode, by the way, called progressive taxi that you can enable inside of the options. It gives you the ability to see little lines on the ground, but those are only relevant after you've asked for permission to go ahead and taxi. So now we're just going to kind of sit here, kind of cruising along. Again, nothing too exciting here. You can see from my little diagram just how incredibly complicated this particular zone is. You can take a look at that runway straight ahead. There's our Bravo 4, just like we called a moment ago. You can see Bravo's right there to our left. And again, we're just following exactly what their instructions are in that particular one. Over here, you can see the gigantic number 1, which is going to be our runway 1. They asked us to cross that. What blew me away a little bit is the fact they asked us to cross us where they did. So we're going to go ahead and disregard. Because what they really want us to do is to take a left here, go up this way, and then take a right and go back across. I'm actually just going to kind of ignore that, kind of wave to everybody. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? Keep in mind, a lot of air traffic controllers will tell you not to cross the runway before calling them. So in this case, we don't need to because they said cross 1. What they'll say is hold short 1, saying you're not supposed to cross it until you've gotten to it. Okay, so now we're crossing. We're going to be getting onto Golf in just a second. So we've already ignored their instructions. Please don't do this on VATSIM. They will have your airplane license very quickly if you choose to do that. All right, we've crossed runway 1. We're going to be going ahead and taking ourselves a left-hand turn here. We're going to start making our way towards runway tree 2. Gentle on the brakes. Okie dokie. Is it me or is that guy not really driving on the right side of the road? Whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, does everybody see the disaster? Let's see just how good our air traffic controller really is. Go back to clearance. Of course, we can go back to ground, but we're already on ground right now, so I'm not worried about it too much. Now, this is Golf 1. This is basically the end of the runway. This would be the right side. Coming up in a second, you're going to see Golf 2. That's going to be this one right here. And if you recall, they advised us to go ahead and use that other Golf in order to get around this guy. So in this case, I'm actually going to do what they asked us to do in the first place and get the heck out of these guys' way. You can see how we basically queued everybody up quite efficiently here. And now we're going to try to get around them on this side. Notice that they gave us permission to cross and not the other way around. It wasn't the ground vehicles they were being nice to, it was us. So this is not exactly illegal here, but we're going to go ahead and keep rolling with it because, again, this is about the air traffic control, not about the backup that's on that taxiway right now. All right, we're proceeding along here, looking pretty good so far. We're coming up on Golf 3. Remember, this is the one we were supposed to take. This isn't the one that I took. We should have been crossing right here. Actually, we were supposed to have zigzagged, cross onto the runway, and then take a right, which would be a little absurd. But you can see everybody's all queued up and waiting for us. So I appreciate that. One time, I think I'm going to give the point to air traffic control. They did a better job than I did. All right, I'm just going to come swinging around like this. Notice they're holding for us. Now we're going on to, this is called Golf 3, is the one we've just crossed onto. Now we're coming up on Alpha, which is this crazy, insane right turn right here. And I should have followed air traffic control's instructions. Sigh. Now, what'll happen sometimes if you're at a very, very busy airport is air traffic control actually call you from time to time and ask you to hold short. If that does happen, make sure you get on here immediately and say, approved, and they will tell you when it is safe to get rolling again. Now, normally taxi speed should never exceed about 30 knots. That's considered a pretty quick taxi. For us, we're going pretty darn close to that, so I don't want to be getting here too fast. Now, technically, we can go ahead and take off from any of these spurs, which are on our left. I think we're coming up on, what is that, Alpha 3? That is Alpha 5, sorry. But we're going to go all the way down to Tree 2 where they asked us to take off. One of the nice things about following their directions, too, is if you look in the sky, you can see anybody who's coming nice and early before you really have to start freaking out about them. So I'm just going to kind of keep proceeding right along here, and then we'll get to the next step of using the in-game air traffic control. And then I'll show you a couple of slick little tricks when we get a little closer. All right, looking pretty good. Runway Tree 2 is on my left. We're going to see the big flashy yellow lights, which the first time as a real pilot, I went, what? I just thought it was funny they had a stoplight on an actual runway. All right, runway Tree 2 is right on our left. Now remember, the air traffic control tower controls the runway, not the ground controllers. The only reason the ground controller let me cross that runway without stopping is the fact that that runway was not in use and the tower was being polite. So the way that this would normally work is you come right up to the line like this, stop, and then you go ahead and call the tower. Now notice we have a request for takeoff via VFR. So we go ahead and ask them. Remember, since we already confirmed with them that it's okay for us to get going, they're just going to go ahead and give us permission. All right, let's go. And that's really all there is to it. So now that we're all set, the next step is, of course, getting flight following, which I'll go ahead and demonstrate once we get rolling in just a moment here. All right. Get us nice and lined up with the runway. Remember, once we've acknowledged takeoff clearance, we are ready to go.
2 red, 6-4 heavy.
Look at the size of this runway versus us. This is so absurd. Go ahead and lift the nose up once you get a little bit faster. And just like that, we are on our way once more. Oi. Nice. Okay, we're now heading out to our destination of BDR. So once we get airborne, of course, you want to stay as straight as possible until air traffic control kind of hands you off. That's kind of it's a nice thing to do. It's the right way to do it. Again, for folks flying on VATSIM, this is going to be a slightly different experience, but that will be a very different video than this. So we're just going to kind of proceed on the same runway heading. Keep in mind that the wind may push you off of the runway heading, so you have to kind of grab it a little bit. In the real world, usually we're constantly looking behind us. Like you can see here that the wind is definitely starting dragging me to the right side of the runway. So I'm going to go ahead and crab just a teeny tiny bit as I start getting a little bit of coverage. Air traffic control will call us back in just a minute, just sort of let us know that we're pretty safe. 6-4 heavy, contort north. I will contact you when we leave my airspace. So we go ahead and say, okay.
Republic Tower red, 6-4 heavy.
And now we are on our way. So once we've cleared everything through those guys, they're not going to bother us. Remember, at any time we can call them up and actually request to land this aircraft afterwards, but we're not going to do that just yet, so I'm not too worried about it. Good time to go ahead and get everything set up as far as your flight goes. I'm going to bring my aircraft to the right a little bit, start bringing us in the general direction that we need to be traveling to take us up to our destination. All right, lift that nose up ever so slightly. It's a pretty good speed for this airplane. We're going pretty good. Oh, we're on Long Island, by the way, in case anybody's curious. New York City is pretty much off my left wing right now. And coming around, again, we want to give them as much clearance as possible. We're going to try not to bring our aircraft around where other airplanes are landing. It's not exactly a very nice thing to do either. All right, looking pretty good so far. Go ahead and give myself a little bit of trim here. That's a pretty good climb speed, about 65 knots. This is not a large airplane. Pretty heavy-duty industrial zone right down there. And there's FRG. Whoop, this aircraft really wants to kind of jerk that way. Remember, we took off from right there, and that was the big backup we caused. So much for not following directions, right? All right. Gonna get ourselves a little bit of extra speed here. We only need about 2,500 feet today. We're not going that far. There we are. We are now on course. I'm going to swing this aircraft nice and gently to the left. And now we're going to proceed until they give us a ring and tell us we're clear of their airspace. Remember, different airports are going to have different kinds of airspace that you're going to have to be considering. So you want to be mindful of all of them, not just that one particular one. Which is going to bring us to our next point in just a minute, once we kind of get a little bit further along on our journey. Remember, his airspace is 10 nautical miles wide. Give myself a little bit of aileron trim.
You are leaving my airspace. Frequency change approved.
All right, frequency change approved. All right, let's talk about the next step. Okay, so now if we were on a visual flight plan, or anything, actually, if we're on a flight plan, we have different rules. If we're flying visually, we're pretty much on our own. You know, it's our responsibility now to make sure we don't accidentally fly into any airspaces that aren't ours without permission. But there's a neat little quirk that, at least in the United States, that we have access to, and that's called flight following. What it is it basically, if the air traffic controller is not too busy, they will actually keep an eye on your airplane for you and let you know if there's any traffic that could potentially cut across your path. It could be a threat to either airplane, if you want to think about it. It's kind of handy. They'll also go ahead and take care of frequency changes and airspaces for you, which is freaking awesome. To do this, I'm going to bring it up again, and you're going to see a new option for approach. So I'm going to go to approach. Notice at any point I can request to flip my flight plan to IFR, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to request flight following. So what they're going to do is they're going to, basically going to say this is where I am, this is my altitude, I request some following.
Request flight following.
Red 64 heavy.
All right. Now notice they've called us back and said, they acknowledge us and they want us to use this frequency. So I'm going to acknowledge the SWAT code, and you're going to come down here and you're going to go 3434.
Heavy.
That's it. Now, in the real world, a lot of times when you do that, they'll tell you to squawk such and such and ident, in which case you're going to reach down here and go boop and press the identify button. That's going to make you flash and blink all over the place on his control panel so he knows exactly which aircraft just did that. We can just go ahead and acknowledge radar contact. That radar contact only comes out, by the way, when we've set our transponder correctly. And just like that, now he is responsible for keeping an eye on us in the air. We still have to operate the plane safely and all that other good stuff, but at least there's somebody out there kind of keeping an eye on things, which again is a nice little quirk. And I'm going to kind of line myself up a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and speed up time. Dun, 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 dun. I probably shouldn't be doing anything like that, but every time we go this fast, it's the only thing I can think of is traveling by map. I think the Muppet movie did that at one point. All right. Nothing like crossing Long Island Sound here in a single-engined airplane. Not exactly what I consider to be terribly safe, to be honest.
Red 64 heavy, please acknowledge. Red 64 heavy.
Yeah, we are almost there. I can see the airport already. And back down to normal time. Aw. We really need fighter jets in this game. Okay, so now what we want to start doing is thinking about landing. You can see here that unfortunately during all of that, I did not catch the fact that he was asking me to go to another frequency. As a result, I've lost my flight following. So if I want to get it back, I have to call him back.
64 heavy is
Unfortunately, that is the downside of playing with your volume off in order to be able to hear myself here.
flight.
So we can request flight following. On a good day, they'll let us use the same frequency they did before. But obviously today was not a good day.
Squawk 22, hard spike.
Notice I don't even have to acknowledge it. It's automatic. He recognizes me immediately. And he also told me my destination is 8 nautical miles away, which is awesome because that makes it a lot simpler. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start getting ready for landing. I'm just going to acknowledge the fact that, yep, that's me. Go ahead and reduce my power a little bit and go down to 20 inches down. And I'm going to let the nose kind of drop down a little bit. And down we go. So now what we can do is we can either look up the frequency of BDR if we wanted to, or we can click on nearest airport list and find the nearest airport to us. In this case, it's going to be BDR. Now notice there's an option for an aetis and there's an option for tower. We're going to be interested in the aetis again because we want to find out what the important code frequency is. All right, Sierra. Okay, we're going to need to know that. This is what time it is. This is what the wind is. Okay, so it's 284, and it's pretty good wind. That's not bad for us. There's our visibility, sky conditions, temperature dew point. Everything looks pretty good. The important thing was Sierra. So now when we call them, we're going to say we'd like to land with Tango. What? Okay, so it just went from Sierra to Tango, so the frequency literally just changed. Now by saying this, they know we got the most up-to-date weather. 64 Bridgeport interior left base for runway 11, altimeter 2992, 284 That's absurd. You would never want to land on that runway with that wind. But unfortunately for us, they are the boss. All right, go ahead and get ourselves all nice and set up here. They said left base for 11. Bring that nose up a little bit. Needs a lot of trim. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at our important critical informations here. Airports. Okay, so it's going to be KBDR. Remember, we're approaching from the south. We're going to go take a look at our runway diagram. Now, the interesting thing is they asked me to do a left base. Right now, I'm on a left base for 29. The runway we're supposed to be landing on is 11. Now, that just I find that just a little bit interesting. But I'm going to go ahead and say I agree. Because, again, they're the boss. We're not. Unfortunately, we can't do a left base. We have to actually fly the full pattern. You can see if I zoom in a little teeny tiny bit. This is runway 6 this way. This end right here, if you take a look really closely, is runway 29er. The runway we need to land on is right there. We can't do a left base without actually flying over there and taking a left turn. So we're kind of improvising based on the instructions they gave us here. Again, I have a separate video kind of explaining how some of that stuff works. They said left base. They didn't say right base. So we're going to go ahead and do our crosswind leg for 29er, then we're going to swing into a left downwind for runway 11. Again, the wind is coming from over here. Why they told me to land here, I'm just following instructions. Get everything looking pretty good here. Go ahead and swing us around. This is a very easy plane to fly, so I'm not too concerned with anything. All right. Pretty good look at the city of Bridgeport. There's 29er. You can see where the old runway was right there that they got rid of. What if there's a school buses? All right, let's go ahead and do our left base turn here. Traffic pattern altitude is about 1,000 feet, so I'm just a little high, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce power. Again, they said fly left base. We're flying left base. You see the big warehouse right there on the water. We're a little tight, but that's perfectly fine. What a lovely day to fly. Anybody down there waving up at us? You always see somebody. I don't see so today. That's all right. Start reducing power significantly. We're going to have to get going pretty darn slow for this airplane. Lift the nose up. Go ahead and bring our first notch of flaps down. Again, they said left base, so we got to do a downwind to get to a base.
Bridgeport Tower Red 64 heavy touch and go. Red 64 heavy Bridgeport Tower. Make left downwind runway 11. Altimeter 29.902 wind 284 at 8. Fly left traffic runway 11 red 64 heavy. Red 64 heavy.
All right, let's go ahead and start bringing ourselves down. There's Route 95. Swinging around here. They're going to go ahead and give us permission to land in just a second. Now, I changed my landing to a touch and go because I felt if we're going to do a VFR kind of tutorial, it's worth taking a look at one other aspect of that, and that's going to be landing at an uncontrolled airport. All right, bring ourselves around. This is our actual left base, shift question mark. All right, keep on coming down. You can see the salt flats pretty distinctively there. Straighten ourselves out a little bit. Look out the window one more time. All right. Go ahead and kill the power. We're awfully high, but that's perfectly fine. All right. Pull the power back all the way. We're more than close enough. A little bit of left foot. All right. That wind is killing us a little bit, but hey, they gave us permission. All right, at any point, of course, we could call them up in air traffic control and say, hey, we're going around, especially given this condition, but oh well. Hey, maybe they know something we don't. All right, there's the runway. Power's all the way at 0. This aircraft is very lightweight, so you just kind of get close to the ground, wait for the bump. We're here, but we're going to go around. Going to go ahead and push the throttle all the way forward after all 3 wheels come down. Lift the nose back up. And we are done. Now, the interesting thing here is we can actually convert my go around into a full stop landing if we wanted to, but we're not actually going to, of course. Just going to continue climbing. Tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of upward trim. And then what we're going to do instead is we're going to go ahead and find ourselves a nearby light right airport that we can use to show you what it looks like if you're trying to do a VFR landing somewhere else. Keep in mind, by the way, we're still technically under flight following. We never actually canceled flight following. It's considered bad form to land the plane with flight following still going. So it's one of those things that if you do choose to use it, you should be probably getting out of it before you went ahead and did anything else. All right, we're clear to the end of the runway. Oh, those guys must love us when they're practicing tennis. Go ahead and bring myself in this general direction. And that's all there is to it. Get a little more altitude, go ahead and speed up time. And that's it. So we're going to cancel landing intentions.
Bridgeport Tower Red 6-4 Heavy cancel landing intention. Red 6-4 Heavy, you're canceling.
All right, and that is all there is to it. So now we're clear, and you've seen exactly kind of how to use the general pieces. Now, let's say you wanted to go ahead and land at an airport that did not necessarily have a full air traffic control tower. So you're going to select the frequency just like you normally do. But the difference here is you're going to have to select a runway for landing. In this case, since the wind is coming from the west. Oh, well, that's useless. We'll go ahead and say we'll use tree 6. Then you'd announce what you're doing. I'll announce my position.
Charlie Tango 52.
So you can see we're 14 miles to the southeast.
4 miles southeast, 1,300 feet inbound to land runway tree 6.
Now, what we can do now is we can actually announce each piece of our actual approach. So I'm going to go ahead and level the aircraft off. Reduce my RPM just a teeny tiny bit. Go ahead and back the throttle back as well. We only need about 25 inches or so. It's perfect. Nice. So what we could do now is we could actually say we're on our crosswind leg. Maybe we just took off. And we could announce each and every position of our actual flight as we were doing it. So in this case, we could say that we're going to go ahead and say we're upwind. Of course, we could say we're on final. Again, none of those really matter unless, of course, you're talking to other traffic, in which case you're doing them a huge favor as far as notifying them where you are relative to that. Now, of course, we could at any point, we could come down here and just forget about the whole thing. We could even go back here, and we could bring ourselves back all the way to the main page as well. So now we should probably call New York approach in, we're still flight following apparently with them. Normally you would have canceled before you landed, so we're actually going to come over here and pop the VFR button, and now we're good to go. All right, hopefully that video was fairly helpful as far as understanding how to use it. Again, those menus make things drastically simpler than they really could be in the real world. In the real world, of course, or if you're over on one of the virtual ATC services, you're going to have to keep track of all that without any little notes to let you know. Speaking of notes, by the way, if you go under Assistance, and you pop down here, you'll notice there's a couple options down here to kind of help you out with some of these things, and you can go ahead and play these things if you want to go ahead and adjust them as well in order to make your experience a little bit easier. Other than that, that's really all there is to it. Enjoy.